Dr. Jeff Tarrant, we are live. Everybody, I am really excited right now. This is episode 1 of season 2 of No More Strangers, and I am absurdly grateful and fortunate to be joined by Dr. Jeff Tarrant of the NeuroMeditation Institute and many, many other things. Jeff, thank you so much for having me down.
Thanks for coming down.
Haven't been in Eugene in maybe 20 years. Things have changed. This is really cool.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's a cute little town.
I like it a lot. It's clean. I'll give you.
Depends on where you go.
I got lucky, I guess. I'm sticking to the cool spots.
Yeah.
So you and I met. I was just recently attending the Psy Games in Charlottesville, Virginia, and you gave a really interesting and compelling speech. I guess we could call it a speech, a talk, a lecture. Yeah. And something that I noted, we were just talking about this, from chatting with some folks that I knew who were just sort of brought there, right? Rote materialist skeptics. They came away from what you were discussing saying, oh, wait, there's something here. Like, this is there. I didn't believe in any of these things. You know how this goes.
Yeah.
And you really were compelling in the way that you described the work that you're doing and the phenomena that you're observing. And so I'm really wanted to get this chance to sit down and talk with you, kick off the season in basically this direction, right? Where showing people that there can be a bridge between this rote materialist experience that so many of us exist in, and recognizing and taking the time to explore what else is going on. And the way that you approach this is very interesting to me. If you don't mind sort of telling us, who the heck are you, man?
Who am I? Oh boy, that's a big question.
It is. I like to start small.
Yeah. I mean, so relevant for this conversation. I'm a psychologist. That's what my training is in, actually counseling psychology. So, when I went to school, my idea was that I was going to go out there and help troubled adolescents.
Sure.
Which had nothing to do with my own experience, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Right. And, went to school, did the normal training, but then shortly thereafter got introduced to neurofeedback.
Yeah.
And, those that aren't familiar, it's basically a technique where you're monitoring brainwave activity and can use that to help people change their own psychophysiological responses. So you can essentially train the brain to be more flexible and adaptive from whatever patterns it might be stuck in. And a part of that is doing something called a quantitative EEG, where we call it a brain map, is kind of the informal way to talk about it.
Right, and this EEG is essentially reading the brain waves as you are processing information.
Well, so normally when we do a quantitative EEG, we're putting an electrocap on somebody with 19 electrodes, so we can measure a lot of different areas of the brain simultaneously. From a clinical perspective, we would usually do just like a baseline recording, where they're not actually doing anything. They're just sitting with their eyes open, They sit with their eyes closed, and then we run that against a database to say, well, how is your brain behaving differently than we would expect? Right? Based on your age and some other factors.
Right.
So clinically, we use that as a way to help understand where somebody's brain might be stuck, how that might be related to anxiety or depression or whatever's going on for them. So I got into that very early in my career, using it clinically, but of course it doesn't take long to go, there's other interesting things we could do with this.
There's something going on here. Right.
Right. And early in my career, I also got interested in things like meditation and qigong, yoga, so it started off, now the way we look at it, fairly tame.
Yeah.
Right? Back then, that was
wild.
That was wild.
I studied qigong and tai chi maybe 16, 17 years ago, and people thought I was mad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I grew up in the Midwest, and I was doing this in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And so even more so, right?
Yes.
It's like, what is this? And for me, that really started getting me to consider that maybe there's more going on here in terms of states of consciousness, in terms of energy,
Yeah.
whatever that is.
Right.
Qi, right? Energy healing. So my early Qigong experience included energy healing.
Right on.
I didn't know at the time that that wasn't just a normal part of Qigong. I mean, it is.
It is, but it's not exactly entry level.
Right.
Like you don't just fire up and say, I'm going to use my hands with energy and make you well.
Right.
That's not how they initially approach you.
No. And, you know, my first Qigong teacher, he actually combined all kinds of stuff together, you know, the Qigong and some shamanic stuff and
Oh, wow.
healing things. And again, I didn't know that that wasn't typical Qigong.
And 20 years ago, I don't think it was. Is that when you were doing this? 20?
Yeah.
20, yeah. Okay.
25 years ago.
Yeah. You found a really cool teacher. Okay.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. He was very cool. And so those experiences, right, of where I started to experience things, I started to feel energy, started to see some interesting things happen. And so then it was like, hey, wait a minute, maybe there's ways to combine neurofeedback and
Right.
brain mapping with some of these interesting states of consciousness. And, you know, so initially it was like experimenting on myself.
Right.
I'd hook my teacher up, you know, like, hey, drop into a meditation state and let's see what your brain's doing.
Yeah.
And that was kind of about it
Okay.
until several years later when, you know, I was introduced to Janet Mayer, who, you know, I talk about at the very beginning of my book because
Right.
it's her fault
Yeah.
that I got into all this.
And for reference, my dear listeners and friends, Jeff has written a couple of books at this point, and the book that I've been reading and I think he's referring to is aggressively titled "Becoming Psychic." It's a bold move, given your background and where you were when you started writing this book.
Well, the subtitle is Lessons from the Minds of Psychics, Healers, and Mediums, or
Yep.
Mediums, Healers, and Psychics.
You
whatever.
decided you didn't want to work in a university anymore, I think is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and actually, so I worked at the university for a few years, and doing some of this stuff, right? Like
Right.
somehow I managed at the University of Missouri, again, middle of the Midwest.
In a fairly respectable school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they actually had at that point, a really strong contemplative practice initiative on campus.
Oh, that's very cool.
So a lot of people were involved in mindfulness-based stress reduction, offering that to staff, offering that to students. So I started teaching that. But then once I got my way in, I was like, hey, how about if I offer a class on Qigong? And they were like, sure. And, you know, so I got to do all these cool things on campus. I had a biofeedback lab. So I had a really cool position. But yeah, after a few years, figured out this isn't really, it's too restrictive.
Sure. Sure.
I even though I got to do a lot of cool things and had a salary and had benefits and good health insurance.
These are nice to have.
They're very nice to have. But, you know, I had already spent time before working at the university on my own, running my own business, doing my own thing.
Right.
And so it was a challenge for me to have to get permission to do things, and the red tape and the bureaucracy and politics.
Yeah.
It was like, I just want to do what I want to do. Like, just let me do my job.
Right.
And that's not how it works.
Yeah. Because and your job was presumably to explore what is happening with the technology that we have.
Well, actually, my job was actually to use the technology to help the students
Okay.
improve their wellness, right?
That's a noble cause. Okay.
Yeah. Interestingly, about 6 months or so after I left, my department got completely closed down. So good timing on my part, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. Sometimes you just got to follow the flow.
Yeah. But so, you know, really it was through those experiences starting to become more open to non-ordinary states of consciousness,
Right.
and then being introduced to Janet Mayer through my position at the university,
Right.
where I started to look at things like channeling and mediumship and psychic abilities that, you know, I had been interested in as a young child,
Right.
but really hadn't looked at since then.
Right.
And so once I kind of started down that rabbit hole, well, here I am.
Yeah, here you are. Yeah. And some of your early work was explicitly I say early work, I mean in this sort of phase of your career, is in evaluating the brain waves or the signals from channels, from mediums, from psychics, which, coming from where you were at the university system, I don't even think taboo or anathema is far enough to describe the degree of separation, right? This is more than a church and state discussion.
You know, yes. And it was funny because I think just I was always kind of the outlier, and I was kind of used to that.
Yeah.
You know, I was already doing things that most people there didn't, considered kind of woo-woo or out there.
Sure.
Even just meditation and qigong and things of that, even biofeedback,
That's interesting.
it's super interesting, right? It's
Okay.
kind of like, oh, brother. I worked in the student health center, and it was mostly a bunch of medical doctors.
Okay.
And, and when I would talk about this stuff, you could just feel them roll their eyes,
Yeah.
like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, give them some Visine to get that a little quieter. Yeah.
Right. And so it was funny because when I started doing this, I actually didn't really think much about it.
Right.
In terms of like, oh, this is going to be weird, or people are going to think I'm out there. I honestly just didn't even really think about it. Right. I just kind of did it. And it was kind of on the side. It wasn't my day job. I wasn't getting paid for any of it. It was like a hobby.
Sort of exploring your curiosity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a hobby. I had this tech. I had these interesting opportunities. And it was like, sure, I'll
Yeah.
do this on the side when I'm not doing something else.
Right.
Why not?
Yeah. I love it. And so if you don't mind, what does the brain mapping or some of the biofeedback look like? If you could describe how this works. Like I have a pretty decent idea, but I might be alone in that.
Yeah. And, basically we've got a cap. I don't know what's sitting here. I've got it in the other room, but it's basically like it almost looks like a swimming cap.
Sure.
Right. So it's a little snug. There's like elastic in it so that it can stretch a little bit. And it's got 19 sensors built into it. So they're little electrodes that are essentially picking up very small amounts of electricity.
Okay.
That's connected to a ribbon. So the cap has this big rainbow ribbon attached to it.
Sure.
That then plugs into this box.
Yep.
So that's an amplifier. So the amplifier amplifies the signal, sends it to the computer. So, initially when we're recording, so all we're doing is recording electrical activity.
Right.
From the brain, right? And because they're teeny tiny signals, we have to amplify that signal, right? We have to do lots of things to make sure we're actually picking up those little tiny electrical signals.
Yep.
And initially, when you look at it on the screen, it just looks like a bunch of squiggly lines. So kind of like what most of us would assume an EEG looks like.
Right.
Or if you've ever had an EEG done at a hospital setting.
Yep.
For a sleep study or concerns about a seizure or something like that.
Right.
It's a bunch of squiggly lines. And if you're a neurologist and you look at that and you're looking for specific things like a seizure, you know what to look for and you can kind of see all of that. What we do that's different and what makes it a quantitative EEG is we take that data and we run it through some filters, some digital filters. So you can separate those squiggly lines into all of the frequencies that make it up.
Got it.
So the analogy I use all the time is white light.
Yep. Sort of a prism effect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you take a beam of white light and you run it through a prism, you get a rainbow.
Right.
And if you think about that for a minute, it's very interesting because what it tells us is that all of those frequency colors, red's a different frequency than blue, they're all contained in white light.
Right.
But you don't see it unless it's filtered.
Right.
Right. Through a prism, through a raindrop, through glasses, through whatever.
Right.
So the EEG is just like that. So there's this squiggly line, which is like white light. There's a whole bunch of frequencies in there. We use a digital filter to separate it, and then we can essentially see the colors of your brain waves.
Right. And then these brain waves are what a lot of people are starting to pay a lot more attention to. So your delta and theta low end range, your alpha, beta, high beta, gamma, and then there's talk of epsilon at the top and the bottom, depending
Right.
where you're measuring, right?
Exactly.
And it seems like it all loops around, which is sort of fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are like the colors.
Right.
Right. So then once we have it separated into different frequencies, we can measure, well, how much of each one of those is there in a sample.
Got it.
So we record for a few minutes, clean it up, so that there's not extra stuff in there that's not brainwaves. And then we say, well, how much alpha was there?
Right.
How much beta was there? Measured in microvolts. And so we can measure that at each of those 19 locations.
Got it.
So you can see we start to get a lot of data really quick.
Yeah.
But what that does is it puts numbers on everything. So that's what makes it a quantified EEG. We have frequencies, we have power. So then when you have that data, you can start to compare it to things.
Yeah.
So I got numbers. Well, I can measure somebody at point A, measure somebody at point B,
Yeah.
and say what changed.
And this was, I think, one of the more compelling elements of the talk that you gave at the Psy Games, where you were, sorry to just, spill it all for you.
No.
But looking at somebody in a normal conversational state like we are, and then saying, okay, switch over to this other experience that you have, be it a psychic experience or a channeling, and I don't necessarily know the difference between channeling and mediumship. Presumably they're different? Question mark?
Question mark.
I can't tell.
Well,
Haven't experienced them myself.
yeah, they can be related.
Okay.
Right. But so the way that I would distinguish the two things is that usually when we're talking about mediumship, and the vast majority of the mediums that I've worked with, when they're doing a reading, right, they're sitting here just like we are.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden they start paying attention to
Okay.
something on the other side.
Yeah.
Right. So presumably there's your deceased grandfather is over here,
Like
right?
tapping him on the shoulder saying, hey, pay attention to me. I gotta
hey,
tell
what's going
this knucklehead something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're kind of having a telepathic conversation
Okay.
with this deceased loved one. And now the information may come in symbols, or it may come in some other way, which then they have to interpret, right? So this information's coming in from this source. They have to interpret it somehow, and then they say out loud what they're getting, right?
Yes.
Now, they're still aware of themselves, at least to some degree.
And this is where the differentiation between mediumship and channeling comes in, where channeling is presumably something else speaking through them, and they may or may not be actively conscious of the experience.
Exactly. Usually
Okay.
they're not.
Got it.
Usually when somebody's channeling, they'll say afterwards that they have no memory of what they said.
That's wild.
So
That's wild.
It's super wild. So it's as if they're stepping aside, they're putting aside their own awareness of self,
Right.
and then
Right.
something else is coming through them. So it's using their voice and their voice. Now sometimes they'll change their voice and things like that, which
I have
is
heard
weird.
that. And what I like about this is because until I started seeing the work that you were doing, where you were doing these comparative brainwave mappings between the states of experience that these folks are having, you're just sort of trusting that what they're saying is true. and there's a lot of concern. I think this is what keeps a lot of people away from this.
Yeah.
That guy's a charlatan. This lady's a hoax. This is a grift.
Yeah.
And what you were showing on stage in your presentation, and what you've shown numerous places, you can find Jeff anywhere, is essentially that there are massive, like very significant changes in both the areas or regions of the brain that are being activated and the signal, the brainwave patterns that are showing up.
Yeah.
And that's super fascinating. And there are a few things I want to touch on there after
Yes.
this, but if you don't mind talking through some of that, because this is where I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's cool too. And it's one of those things that the further you explore it, the more you figure out like, oh, next time I need to do this, or this is another angle
Right.
that we need to look at. But yeah, one of the things that we've sort of seen is that when somebody is doing a mediumship reading in general, their brainwaves shift in certain ways. I'm trying to be careful with the language I use because there's also differences.
Which is wild.
It is wild.
This is something I want to touch on later, but yeah.
Yeah. So if I took 10 mediums and I did this, you're not necessarily going to see the exact same changes in their brainwave patterns. That being said, there are certain brain regions in particular that show up a lot.
Right.
Like to the point that at this point in the game, I'm going like these parts of the brain have to be involved one
Yeah.
way or another. And so what the difference seems to be how somebody shifts into this state, whatever it is. And you're right. My approach hasn't been trying to prove
Right.
that what they're saying is accurate or not.
I don't know that we can at our current state of technology. I don't think we can. There are other reasons to believe that what they're saying is true, and you've documented some of this in your book.
Right.
And also something is happening.
Right. And, my approach has kind of been, especially in the early days, a lot of the mediums that I worked with were certified through the Forever Family Foundation or through Windbridge or through some of these other organizations that have a very vigorous testing procedure
Right.
to determine if these mediums are pulling through information that's evidential.
Right.
Right. So it's specific, it's concrete, it's something that you can go verify.
Yeah.
And so they'd all kind of been through that. And so for me, I was kind of like, I don't need to prove that they can do this. It's already been done.
They've sort of been pre-qualified before coming to you.
Exactly.
Right.
So for me, it was like, I'm just going to go with that.
Right.
And like, let's just see what their brain does, And yeah, we have found some very interesting patterns.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want me to talk about specific brain regions or...
I don't mind if you do. I think something that you've spoken about a few times is the right parietal lobe, which I guess a lot of people refer to as the God spot. And depending who you listen to online, it is a controversial idea.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is fair.
It's totally fair.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of people don't like the idea of a God spot. And this comes up every few years.
Yeah.
Somebody else will come up and say, we found the God spot in
Yeah.
the brain. And, and it may be something different than what I'm talking about.
Could be.
And so, of course, the reason that there's controversy and people don't like that is because, well, there's not one spot in the brain, probably, that's related to these things. The reason that I still use the term in relation to the right parietal lobe, which is, kind of back over here in this little corner, sometimes it's also the same as the temporal-parietal junction. So the temporal lobe is here, the parietal lobe is here, right? So there's...
And you've got a little junction space that sort of connects or bridges.
Right.
Okay.
And it's on the right side. And the reason that area of the brain is interesting, besides the fact that it shows up behaving differently in a lot of these mediums, I'm not going to say all of them, a lot. If I had to pick a number, I'll say 70%.
Okay.
Right? That something weird goes on over there when they're doing their reading.
Right.
And that part of the brain for me is particularly interesting because one of its jobs is creating boundaries.
Right.
Between self and others.
Right.
Right. So when it's doing its normal job, what it's doing is it's creating a separation. And it's saying, I'm Jeff.
Right.
I live in this body. You're JT. You live in that body. We're separate.
Right.
We don't have the same thoughts.
No.
We don't have the same physical experience. And so my theory is that it's not just my theory, other people have talked about this as well, is that when you disrupt the normal functioning of that area, what it may do is create an opportunity to step outside of your own ego boundary.
Yeah.
So now I can understand your perspective better, or I can connect to something outside of myself, whereas normally I couldn't do that.
Right.
So that's I think a theory that makes a lot of sense. And again, we see that area disrupted so much that there's got to be something to it.
Right. And there are references to people who have traumatic brain injury in that region having a higher propensity for what would be considered divine or spiritual experience.
Yes.
I can't speak to how psychedelics affect the brain, but it seems reasonable to suggest that area is impacted as well based on the literature, the experiences, etc.
Yeah. So it's interesting because, psychedelics obviously impact lots of areas of the brain as well.
Right.
The primary region that gets the most attention is the default mode network,
right,
which is a big network in the brain. And it kind of shuts it down. And, the default mode network, its job normally is to create a sense of self.
Okay, so beyond proprioception, more like whole recognition of self.
Identity.
Okay.
Right? Like, who am I? And how do I identify myself in all the ways, and how do I think of myself in relation to the world?
Right.
Right. And so I think it's appropriate that it's called the default mode network, because it's our default mode.
Right.
It's literally what we do when we're not doing something else.
Yeah.
We're thinking about ourselves.
Right.
Right. I'm thinking of, because even,
Not even necessarily in a narcissistic way. Like, this
No.
is just how we experience life.
right. It's like, I'm hungry.
Right.
Okay. That's you thinking about yourself
Right.
and your own state.
Right.
And even if you're going, well, I wasn't thinking about myself, I was thinking about my partner. Okay, but you're thinking about your partner in relation to yourself, right? Like, you can't take yourself
Right.
out of the equation. But,
It seems difficult to do.
well, yeah, right. I shouldn't say you can't.
Right.
Because you can.
You can.
And that's partly what psychedelics does, is it disrupts the default mode network temporarily, so that you have the opportunity to see in new ways, right? So you get new information because you don't have those same limitations of, oh, this is what it means to be Jeff.
Right.
It's like, well, if that idea all of a sudden disappears for a little while, well, what it means to be Jeff
Yeah.
might expand dramatically.
I have a lot of questions and some thoughts on this, because got to think how I want to say this really quickly. I apologize. A lot of this seems to be suggesting that really the brain is just acting as a filter for all of this sensory information. And part of what you were saying, different people are experiencing these sensations or these signals in very different ways, and it's showing up very differently in the brain mappings that you're doing. And shutting down or turning off some of that default mode network suggests that you're now turning off a filter of signal that's coming into your brain, translating into, in my opinion, how the consciousness is experiencing existence. Not to go full woo, but it seems as though the brain is a translation device for the mind. And so when you take that filter off, now we can get into dangerous concepts like increasing empathy. Very controversial.
Yeah. Why would we want to do that?
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree. And we know it's not even a belief.
Okay.
Right? We know that lots of different parts of the brain, what they're doing is exactly what you're saying. And so, Aldous Huxley talked about it as a reducing valve.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, wow. Yes, he did. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, which is exactly what the brain does.
Right.
And we have lots of, I think, very basic ways that we can understand that, right? So the example you hear a lot is that, like, well, dogs can hear frequencies that we can't hear, right? Okay.
Cool.
Right. So those frequencies exist, but our little limited system says, yeah, we can't pay attention to that. Visually, we can't see certain things, right? Like, but then even beyond that, we do this all day long. We don't know we're doing it because it's automatic, but we're moving through the world and we're not seeing everything. We're not taking in everything.
In fact, we're blocking out some things that we can see
Yes.
because we've become inured to them. We no longer, they're not relevant to our survival. They're not relevant to our needs. We move right past them.
Exactly. And part of that is functional.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Because if we had to process all of the sensory information that was available, we would probably not be very stable.
No. In fact, I suspect that leads to some of the instability we see in a lot of the folks that are on the streets.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
And that may be, and this has been talked about before, right? Like one of the characteristics of something like schizophrenia is sort of an inability to filter out information. And so you can think of that, right? That if you couldn't filter out any information, then what you're left with is an overwhelming amount of data that you have to try to make sense out of, which is impossible.
Yeah, we are not, at least as far as I can tell, wired to handle that.
No.
Yeah.
So then what happens, right? You start making connections that aren't there.
Yeah.
And you start, paying attention to things that aren't important, right? And that you don't need to be paying attention to. So those filters are there for a good reason. And they also limit us.
Yeah.
And in some cases, they limit us severely, right? Like where we have blinders on. And so I think it's a really good way to think about what's happening with psychics and mediums and probably just about anybody doing anything in the psi world.
Right.
Is you have to figure out how to at least temporarily turn off those filters, or at least some of them.
Right. At least some of them. And it seems I mean, I think we can talk about the telepathy tapes
Sure.
a little bit.
We can talk about it a little bit.
A little bit. Noting that you're still doing work on this, and there's stuff that it's cool. Just stop me when I can.
Yeah.
But it seems as though there are some pretty interesting advantages. So not all of these are necessarily protecting us, or maybe they are. The potential of things like telepathy in a certain subset of our, I don't know, experience of people. Some of this, so you've measured some of these brains.
Yep.
What have you been seeing that's in common there? What's the theme in terms of where things are being activated, if you can speak to that? And if you can't, I'll just
edit it out.
Exactly.
I can talk about it in generic terms.
Perfect.
So, and just to back up, just in case
Sure,
some
thank you.
people aren't familiar.
Yeah.
So the Telepathy Tapes is a podcast that's going to be a documentary coming out hopefully in April.
Right.
That is really following the experiences of nonverbal autistic individuals, and particularly their telepathic abilities. And so, they communicate by pointing to a spelling board.
Right.
So because they're nonverbal. So that's how they communicate. And so I've been involved with that project pretty much from the beginning, and have had the opportunity to witness just some amazing things in terms of their abilities. But also have had the opportunity to do some brain mapping with them, which is a little tricky because one of the things about doing an EEG is it's sensitive to any electricity, right? It's just a dumb sensor. Mm-hmm. It doesn't know the difference between your brain wave and the electricity coming out of the wall.
Right.
It'll pick it all up. And so if you move, if you smile, if you swallow, if you talk, it creates muscle tension.
Okay.
Which is electricity, and it gets picked up by the sensors. So, because a lot of these individuals, I don't want to say all, but have a serious level of apraxia where they don't have good control over their bodies. So there's a mind-body disconnect. So their bodies may not behave.
I wondered.
The way that they want them to.
Right.
And so, when you see somebody with, significant autism where they're flapping their hands or they're twirling in circles or they're doing things like that,
right,
they don't really have control over that. Their bodies are just doing what they're doing. So that makes it difficult to get a good EEG signal.
Of course.
Now, I have had the opportunity to work with a couple of non-speakers, especially older ones. It seems like for many of them, things start to settle down. Their body becomes a little bit more grounded. They're able to be, still a little bit longer.
They're maybe a little more integrated into their physical body.
They might be a little more integrated. It seems like when they get older, it also seems like as they learn to spell. So as they learn to communicate.
That's interesting.
Which, think about that. Can you imagine not being able to communicate for 20 years?
Seriously.
How dysregulating that would be, that you've got all these thoughts going on, but you can't.
And what's fascinating here, I think, is that for the longest time, people just assumed they weren't thinking.
Yeah.
And it turns out that's the opposite of true.
It's these kids and adults, they're amazing and they're brilliant. So once they have the opportunity to communicate, it's very clear that they have a much deeper understanding of a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And certainly way more than we ever thought, right? Because we had the idea, because we look at their bodies.
Right.
And we say, oh, look, they're doing these unusual behaviors. There must not be anything going on.
Right.
And it's just a complete disconnect.
Yeah.
So you can't look at their bodies or their behavior and make any assumptions, which is hard to do.
It's very hard to do. Because
do
that
that
is
all the
how we
time.
are conditioned.
Of course.
We look for difference. We look to find that delta between expected behavior and observed behavior. And if it's not what we expect, that's sort of dangerous.
Right.
It makes us concerned about a sickness or a contagion. And we have this sort of off-putting vibe to it.
Yeah.
And then we other it tremendously.
Yeah. And just recently, we were doing some testing with some of these kids, And one of them, she kept kind of like falling down on the ground, and she would lay down on the ground. And so the perception, the way that we would view that is like, they don't want to do this.
Right.
Right? Like they
Oh,
don't
that
want to
wasn't
do
the
what we're doing.
case?
No.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
So if you take the spelling board and you ask them, like, do you want to do this? Yes. They spell yes. And it's like, okay. It's like, do you want help getting your body off of the ground? Yes.
Okay.
And it's like, okay. And then fall right back down. Right? And so it's like, so the ways that we would interpret that, you can't.
No.
You just can't. It means nothing.
Our understanding of nonverbal communication is just out the window at that point.
It's out the window, which is really challenging. So anyway, getting ourselves back
Thank you.
to the topic at hand. I've seen these kids do some just amazing telepathic things, particularly with their primary caregiver.
Yeah.
But in some cases, it extends far beyond that. There was one instance that we were doing on a Zoom session where the non-speaker read me, had never met me before, and was able to spell out exactly what I was looking at that nobody else was seeing except for me.
What did that feel like for you?
It was amazing.
Okay.
Because that was the first time that I had any of the non-speakers actually read me.
Yeah.
At first, it just kind of blew my mind, even though I've seen so much.
Right.
But also, an interesting thing was I felt this weird sensation in the back of my head.
I was curious. A friend and I have been experimenting with some of these things.
Yeah.
And they keep talking about when the connection happens, like a little like feeling or presence in the back of their head.
Yeah. And that's
I was
not
curious.
uncommon.
I was curious if you would experience that because you've noted in your writing that you're fairly sensitive to some things.
Yeah. And not other things.
And not other things. So that's really cool.
Yeah. And that's not super uncommon. People will talk about that they, when they're feeling connected or tapped in a certain way, that they feel a sensation in their head, usually in the back.
Right.
Sometimes a little more over toward that God spot, over toward the right side.
Interesting.
Interesting. And they'll say this independent, right? Like,
Right.
I haven't told
You're not
them
prompting this on anything, right?
No. Like, they'll just say like, oh yeah, I had this weird feeling. Oh, where was it? It's like, interesting.
Data point.
Data point. So what did we find, right? Like, so looking at some of them and what they're doing, I mean, really, I've got one really, really, really good data collection just because this person's just really solid,
Cool.
And again, I can't get into too much specifics.
Oh, good.
But the two things that I think are really important, one is you see a quieting of the frontal lobes. So the frontal lobes shut down, essentially, which again gets into that disinhibition, that turning off the filter kind of a thing.
Right.
The other thing is you see a left-right hemisphere distinction in terms of what gets activated and what gets quiet. And again, this is another really common pattern, which I think makes a lot of sense because the left hemisphere is much more verbally oriented for most people.
Right.
Right? So you've got two giant language centers on the left hemisphere. So the front is more expressive language and the rear is more receptive language,
Okay.
but they work together. So you've got this huge network of language on the left hemisphere. And if you think about it, when we start using language with something, what we're doing is we're limiting it.
That's exactly right. We're defining, its limits. Right.
Its limits.
Right.
We're taking an experience and then we're putting it into words, which changes it.
Explicitly.
You can't use words to accurately describe an experience.
That's right.
So we've modified the experience just by the fact that we used words.
Right.
Right.
Taking it down from this multimodal, experience of existence to something that we can put into an auditory framework that someone can then try to translate based on their own experiences.
And when you look at the right hemisphere, it's not language oriented. I mean, there's still language things that happen there, but it's much more of an experiential way of engaging with the world.
Yeah.
So it's more of like a present moment. What are you actually experiencing, right? And then the left hemisphere turns it into words.
Which we then use to create this narrative around the experience rather than experiencing it ourselves.
Exactly. So you can think of the narrative on the left hemisphere, that's our interpretation of something. whereas the right hemisphere is more of the actual experience.
Right.
So it makes sense that when you start looking at these abilities, that they would really be needing to access more of that right hemisphere stuff,
Right.
and staying out of the left hemisphere. In fact, one of the examples I give a lot is in remote viewing.
Right.
They talk about an analytical overlay, which is what you don't want.
Right.
Right? An analytical overlay is your interpretation, that you're getting information, right hemisphere, you're getting images, you're getting symbols, you're getting a feeling.
Yes.
That's the experience. And then your left hemisphere goes, oh, that must be the Eiffel Tower, right? You turned it into, you made a
Right.
story out of it.
Right.
And the story in this case is Eiffel Tower, right? And maybe it had nothing to do with the Eiffel Tower.
Right.
So that's an analytical overlay. That's the left hemisphere taking over. And so I think one of the big issues is not just with remote viewing, but with all of these abilities, being able to know the difference.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're getting information, is that my left hemisphere making up a story? Or is this sort of pure data?
And not to muddy the waters here, but is the capacity to identify or recognize and then identify and classify that a purely left brain function, which then applies that analytical overlay?
I think I'm following you. And so it's interesting, right? Because
Right.
I think you can use language as long as you're not getting into analysis and it
Okay.
doesn't cause a problem. So
Okay.
for example, a lot of mediums, when they're doing a reading, they'll be talking very fast. And it's like, I'm getting this and I'm getting this and I'm getting this and I'm getting this. And they'll tell you, if you ever take a mediumship class, they'll tell you, don't edit yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Just say whatever, even if it sounds crazy, even if it makes no sense, say it. And so I think what they're doing is they're staying in the right hemisphere. So they're reporting
Right.
what they're getting, but they're not
Interpreting
analyzing
it. It's literally just a stream of consciousness, or I've heard people refer to it as speaking from your heart.
Yeah.
Which is such an interesting way to say it.
Yeah. I think all of those are probably saying the same thing.
I think so.
And I think that's the trick, because, even for myself, the amount that I've experimented with trying to develop some of these things, that's half of the game, is figuring out like, okay, wait a minute. Am I now creating something
Right.
as opposed to just the pure experience? And I feel like in some cases there's a very subtle, thin line.
Right. Between what's actually happening and the artifacts we're creating around it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh man, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah. Good luck is right. Well, I think a lot of people who spend a lot of time in meditation, it seems to me, maybe this is just my experience, but a lot of the work is trying to balance those out, reduce the one, increase the other. And I think some of what you've written about experiencing or working on yourself is doing exactly that.
Yeah. And I think you brought up meditation, and I feel like that's one of the things that virtually every psychic medium that you talk to, you say, well, what can I do? And they say, meditate. Why is it that every single one of them brings this up, right? Yeah. I think it's because you're learning, to quiet down that internal chatter, left hemisphere stuff.
Yep.
But you're also learning to increase your awareness of your internal state.
Okay.
Both of which are really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm curious how much of this, and maybe this is a totally off-topic idea, but how much of this is the need to reduce that chatter seems to be something that may be more modern time, where we're constantly inundated with the requirement for that, as we would call it, left brain analytical, narrative-driven approach to make it through our days in the world that we've constructed, and how things may have looked in a, not even pre-industrial, but a pre-aggregate society approach. Back in the tribal eras.
Yeah.
That we all romanticize like crazy.
Right. And, I think you're right, that, and again, I can even just speak from my own experience, just noticing, I was just doing this the other day, noticing how much of my day is completely filled with loud external stimuli.
Yeah.
Whether it's work, and then what? Okay, I'm done with work, and I'm driving home, and I'm listening to a podcast.
Because we can't not.
Because we can't not, right? Or I'm messaging somebody, or I'm responding to something, or I'm scrolling Facebook, or I'm watching Netflix, right? Like whatever it is, I'm bombarding myself
Yeah.
with external information, which is going to make it, those things are all very loud.
Yeah.
And we're trying to pay attention to very subtle things. And so if you don't give any space,
there's no chance.
there's no chance.
You have no
don't
opportunity.
stand a chance.
Oh, man.
I was standing outside last night watching the stars for a minute.
Same. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It was great.
It's gorgeous. And it's like, wow, right? And it's just like, how different, right? Like,
Yeah.
that it's like now, that's like, wow, I stood outside for 10 minutes and looked at the sky.
Yeah.
Whereas back in the day, that's what you did.
It is.
You lived outside.
In my childhood, that's what we did. In fact, standing outside last night, I was brought back to my childhood, looking at the stars with my dad, and I sent him a very sweet note. Hey, Dad. Basically remembering that those were really peaceful, wonderful times. And they're so far removed from the current state of my life.
Yeah. And, so that being closer to nature, I think, does make it easier,
Yeah.
because it's a different vibe
Yeah.
altogether. And, and there's research on this, that just being in nature quiets people down.
It does.
It quiets your nervous system down. It settles your mind. It settles your thinking, which is probably why everybody goes to nature on vacation.
Yeah. And it's funny. Oh, man. I am very guilty of sort of sabotaging my own experience of nature because, hey, if I'm going to go take a hike, I might as well listen to a podcast while I'm doing it. Wait, what? That is antithetical to the goal here, friends. Like, and we've all heard the people with the jam box as they're rolling through nature. It's like, oh,
Right.
I love you. Please don't.
Right. Right. So then you don't see.
Right. Exactly.
You can't pay attention. Again, it's like, what's the signal and what's the noise?
Right.
And, and so if you've got so much noise, you'll never hear the signal.
This is, I think, an interesting transition point because I know we don't want to talk too much about telepathy tapes and signal. You've got a lot of cool stuff coming out, gang. He's got some cool stuff coming out. Trust me. But you write a little bit about this in Becoming Psychic, and I was sort of fascinated with the idea of Gansfeld light work.
Yep.
And the way it corresponds with auditory white noise or brown noise, which I use to sleep. Shocking how that's actually appropriate. I fell into that. And how that sort of helps to quiet everything is essentially what it sounds like you were saying.
Yeah. So, the Gansfeld is it's a pretty old technique.
Right.
And what they used to do would take a ping pong ball,
Right.
cut it in half, strap them to your eyeballs.
Yeah.
Right. Tape them on. So you got these ping pong balls.
Yeah.
It actually looks really funny if you see a picture of it.
It's hilarious.
It's hilarious. And then they would shine a red light on your face. And so what the ping pong balls do is diffuse the light so that, whether your eyes are open or closed, it becomes a whole field, which is what Gansfeld essentially translates to. Whole field. So it's just red. And then at the same time, what you do is typically listen to white noise or a variation of white noise. And white noise, we were talking about white light.
Right.
White noise is all of the frequencies
Right.
of auditory signals that you can hear at the same volume. So it's all noise. There's no signal, right? Which is why it sounds like static. It's a good imitation.
It was a very good imitation.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate the try. I like that.
yeah.
That worked.
And so you do these together, right? And so if you think about what's happening, you're providing your two main senses for most people,
Correct.
vision and audio, with nonsense.
Right.
So there's a bunch of stimulation, but there's no signal. There's no signal in either of them,
Right.
right? And so what's your brain left to do? Your brain's left to look for a signal,
Right.
right? And so I think that's why that technique has been used in telepathy research. It's been used in ghost hunting to talk to ghosts. It's been used in all kinds of different things. We've been using it as a way to help people tap into more psychic or spirit communication states. And again, I think it's all connected. That essentially what you're doing is you're knocking your brain out of its normal perceptual rhythm.
Right.
And there's a lot of ways to do this. But that seems to be the key. If we go back to what we were saying before, that the normal functioning of the brain is to filter. Well, how do we knock it out of that rhythm?
Right.
Well, there's lots of ways, right? And not everything's going to work for everybody. But Gansfeld might be one way. You just bombard it with nonsense.
Right. So basically shutting down, in this case, the optic nerve's capacity to send signal, because it's all pure, full spectrum signal.
Yeah, right. And so, at least for some people, that seems to help them cue in to other information. And for most people, it's pretty pleasant too, which is nice.
Yeah.
And you talked about other types of noise, like brown noise, and there's pink noise.
Right. Like the higher end of the frequency, the brown being the lower end of the frequency.
Exactly.
There's violet noise, there's all these others.
Right. And of course, sound doesn't have color.
Right.
They're just using the color, kind of the way we talk about brainwaves, the way we talk about light,
Right.
is a way to separate certain frequencies. And so, yeah, in some cases, the higher frequencies of noise people prefer, or the lower frequencies. One of the things I like doing is setting it up where you're getting the lowest and the highest.
I played with this after reading that. It's cool.
It is cool.
It's cool.
Yeah. For a lot of people, that seems to work.
Yeah.
And work in terms of helping them
Right.
tap in or whatever. And my theory of why that may be actually relates back to the brainwaves. Because from a brainwave perspective, what we will often see is a big shift in the slowest and the fastest brainwaves.
Right.
And the stuff in the middle, usually doesn't do much.
Right.
Usually just kind of hangs out. So it's like, well, what if we worked with the lowest and highest frequencies of sound?
Right.
So far, it seems like maybe we're onto something.
Right. Yeah, and I gotta say, I appreciate that you test all this on yourself. There's something sort of satisfying about that idea.
You got to guinea pig yourself.
You
first.
have to, exactly. That's exactly how you said it too.
Yeah.
And I think this also relates to some of the new work that you're working on, like the stuff that you really get excited about, like some of this audio video entrainment. Is that really where you're moving your research and your work?
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting. I mean, because
not to limit you.
Right, exactly, right. Like, don't box me in.
Yeah.
We know how that goes.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, there's kind of two different areas for me. One is research,
Right.
and one is more practical applications. Now they do overlap, in certain cases. But so certainly in the practical applications department,
Right.
one of the things that I've been working with a lot and will continue is working with audio visual entrainment technology, but then also working with neurofeedback.
Right.
And the idea is kind of what we were just talking about, that are there ways that we can nudge the brain out of its normal way of processing information to help us tap in a different way. So for those of us who we want to develop our abilities, but it's like, I can't seem to get anything, or it's super inconsistent, or whatever. So it's like maybe these tools are a way that we can facilitate that, that nudge. And whether it becomes a permanent part of a practice or not, ideally it would just be a tool to help you get going, and at some point you don't need it.
Right.
But I've got a good friend who's a spirit artist in Massachusetts. So she draws the person. She uses both hands.
Which is wild.
It's super wild. So she draws whoever's coming through and then uses that as a way to start getting information. And so anyway, she took one of our classes and started using the glasses. And even though she's been doing this for 1 million years, like she's like, now I always use the glasses before I go do a reading.
Oh, that's cool.
So she's already tapped in. She already knows how to do this. But so for certain people, it does seem to be kind of a way to expedite
Yes.
the process. It seems to be especially true for people that are already a little bit tapped in.
Yeah.
Is that it's kind of like a kicker. For people that have no perceived ability, I'll say it that way.
Well phrased.
Thank you. It's kind of like, sometimes it does the trick and sometimes they're still kind of struggling. And I think that's for a couple of reasons. Because I think in most cases, if you haven't figured out how to tap in, simply using technology to zap your brain isn't necessarily, it's kind of like using technology for meditation.
Right.
Right? Like people will put a thing on their head, and I do this, so, but thinking that the technology is going to be the same as meditation. And it's like, well, are you consciously shifting your awareness or are you just zapping your brain?
Right.
Right? Like, so I think there's both. Like we still have to learn how to shift our awareness.
Yeah.
Whether it's meditation or whether it's psychic abilities or mediumship or whatever. So the tools may help you.
Yeah.
They may nudge you in that direction, but you still got to learn how to get there yourself. Right?
Yeah,
Like you still have to do something.
Right. They might show you what it feels like to be in that state, but you still have to find your way there sort of on your own.
Well, yeah, you still have to navigate.
You
right?
just have to know where to go.
Yeah. So I'll give a personal example.
Yeah.
Because the other piece of this that I'm getting ready to start our first class with this, and I'm pretty excited about it. But it's using neurofeedback.
Okay.
Instead of audio-visual entrainment,
Right.
It's using neurofeedback. So you're getting immediate feedback on what your brain waves are doing while you're meditating or whatever.
And this is like through an auditory channel.
Right.
Okay.
So essentially, we'll just pick an example, right? So let's say we had an electrode sitting over on the God spot.
Right.
And we said we want to decrease fast brainwave activity there. Now, maybe we want to do something else, but whatever, for this example. So it's monitoring your high beta. And when your high beta goes below a certain level, the audio signal, which is usually some kind of like meditation music or white noise
Right.
or whatever, that signal will increase.
Oh, good.
So let me say this.
So
let me say
positive
this again.
feedback. Okay.
Positive feedback. So your high beta drops.
Yep.
That's the goal in this example. And then the music gets a little bit louder. Right? So that's your cue that it's like, oh, I'm in the right spot.
Yeah.
Right? My brain's doing what I want it to do. Okay, cool. And then you get distracted and you start thinking about something else. All of a sudden that signal, your beta goes high. You lose the audio drops down, it's really quiet. So, which brings your attention.
That sounds so distracting. Yeah.
It's right, and I'll come back to that because it is distracting at first. But then you become aware immediately. Like, oh, what happened? Like, where did my attention go? Like, oh, I'm thinking about the show I was watching on Netflix last night. I'm not even doing my thing.
Yeah.
Right?
What happened on Alien Earth last night? I don't even know.
Exactly. So then you have to like shift your attention back, right? And then here comes the signal, right? So it's a good learning tool once you get past the distraction aspect, because initially it can be distracting. Because again, the analytic part of your brain, the left brain,
Yep.
is going to be going like, well, why did the volume get louder? Well, why did it get quieter? What am I doing? I'm going to try to make it do something, right?
Right.
Through effort, which is not the way to do it. So there's all these games you have to kind of play and overcome to really get the benefit. But getting back to the point,
Yeah.
I've been doing this a lot with myself recently, like pretty much every day for the last, month, let's say. And I've never been particularly skilled at spirit communication. And largely I didn't care.
Right.
Because I was like, there's other things I'm interested in and I seem to be better at, whatever.
Play to your strengths, right?
Play to my
Yeah.
strengths. But I was kind of like,
This would be really neat to experience.
I wonder if I could do this, right?
Right.
So I've been working at it. And one of the things that has really occurred to me very clearly is that there's a certain way to pay attention for me. I don't want to speak for everybody, but there's a certain way to pay attention that definitely facilitates getting information. I don't know if it's from the other side or it's from my I don't know where it's coming from.
Right.
But there's a certain way of paying attention that requires a certain level of focus and directed attention. And when I have the feedback, I'm much more aware of where my attention is.
Got it.
And I'm much better able to get into that space. Whereas without the feedback, it's easier for me to just float off, get distracted, start thinking about whatever project I'm working on or
Right.
whatever. So I do think that there is the potential for some of this technology to be really helpful learning tools for people that want to explore these things, because how do you know what your brain's doing?
Right.
Unless you measure it. I mean, we don't, and even that, again, quick example. So my assumption, looking at some of the data that I've got, I'm going to switch. Well, actually, we'll stay with the God spot.
Yeah.
So my assumption was that it's like, oh, we want to quiet that down, right? Because that's going to disrupt the normal functioning. So I started running those sessions on myself. Mm-hmm. Wasn't going so good.
Okay.
And I'm like, all right, like what's going on here? So I said, you know what? I'm going to change the session. I'm just going to do an assessment.
Right. Rather than sticking with a hypothesis that's failing.
Exactly. So I'm just going to monitor all the brain waves at the same spot, and I'm going to tap in the best I can and see what it looks like. So I did that, and noticed that it was like it took me a while to drop in. I was thinking too much. I was trying too hard. But maybe the last 5 minutes of a 20-minute session, I was like, okay, I feel like I'm heading in the right direction. Like, okay, cool. Stopped, looked at the data. Well, what happened in the last 5 minutes? Look at delta, nothing really. Theta, nothing. Right. Alpha, nothing. Beta, high beta went.
Okay.
Gamma.
To the roof, right.
And I was like, okay. So my assumption.
I wondered if gamma was spiking for you. Okay.
Yeah. So my assumption was that the fast brain waves should go down. But what was happening for me when I felt tapped in was they were skyrocketing.
I've heard this a lot. We can call it anecdotally. And there's a friend of mine that I would love for you to measure. But she reports going all the way up on gamma. And we've done some, she and I have done, my friend, she goes to Monroe frequently and does their discovery program, which is very similar to what you're describing. Judith, the woman that runs it, uses Mind Mirror as the technology stack that she's working with this on. And when she hits. Like, it's wild to look at her readings.
Yeah. And I'm not surprised, and what this caused me to do is go back and look at my data, all the data again, and go, okay. And certainly there are mediums, psychics that I've looked at where that's what you see, is this giant spike of gamma, high beta, gamma. They tend to go together.
Right.
And so again, it's another good lesson for me that it's like, okay, it's not going to be a one size fits all.
Right.
Some people, they're going to decrease high beta and gamma.
This is so cool.
Some people are going to increase it.
Right.
So it makes my job a little more difficult, or a lot more difficult, when you're trying to work with a group of people.
Right, because you're going to have to tailor to every single individual, because everybody's got, there's no, like you just said, there's no one size fits all package here.
Exactly.
So you have to spend the first N sessions trying to figure out what's your personal baseline look like. What's your sounds like it scales well.
So I rewrote my curriculum, and it's a 6-week class, right? And so it's exactly that. The first week, orientation, and then assessment. Mm-hmm. And this is how you do it. This is what it looks like. Collect a bunch of data, take notes. I've got access to their data, so I can look at it. But I want them to tell me, oh, this session was where I really felt more tapped in.
Right.
And even if they're not like tapped in per se, I think most people who are doing this work can notice a difference if they feel more tapped in than not. Maybe they're not getting a download, but you can tell subjectively, like, ooh, I was getting closer, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's all we need. Like, what does your brainwaves look like when you're moving in the right direction,
mm-hmm.
right? Like, you don't have to be talking to an angel. Just, what shows us, what's the distinguishing factor? So the first week, they're just going to collect data.
Yeah.
We'll get them oriented, collect a bunch of data, and then I'm going to make everybody an individualized protocol.
That's cool.
And then we'll work with that. And so first we're going to do right frontal, because that's another area that shows up a lot.
Okay.
And then we're going to do God spot. So we're just going to do 2 spots, right frontal and right parietal. But we'll do the same process. We'll do an assessment, make you an individualized protocol. Let's run with it. And then now let's work with the other spot.
Right.
But so the nice part is that by the end of this, they'll have the ability to be starting to play around with, different assessments, because you could move the electrode, right? So you could have an electrode here initially, and maybe you get some interesting data. It's like, well, what if you put it here?
Right.
You could do that. Maybe there's something more interesting that comes
be.
up. So, so I think we've set this up in an interesting way that it's a nice balance where, you don't want to give people too many options, because then you're never really going to explore any of them fully.
Right. So you're not going to do the full brain map and say, go.
No.
Like, that's too much.
No. But we know the 2 areas that that show up the most.
Yep.
We know it tends to be right hemisphere. We know it's the right front and the back. And so let's work with those.
Yeah.
But there is a way to make it more individualized. With the audiovisual entrainment, where we're using light and sound stimulation to shift the brain into specific frequencies. So it's not coaching the brain, it's driving the brain.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So actually, just because we're on camera.
Yeah.
So this is one example, right? So they look like this. They're just simple little.
Some Macho Man sunglasses.
Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Randy Savage.
Yeah, Randy Savage.
Yeah. I was thinking 80s sci-fi.
Hey, it's that too.
Yeah.
But...
It's a multi-purpose.
Yeah.
But on the inside behind this shield, there's 4 lights.
Okay.
On each side. And so you plug it in, you pick which protocol you want to run, and then the lights flicker at a certain rate.
Got it.
And then there's audio tones that match it.
Okay.
And so we could pick a theta program. Theta is between the frequencies of 4 and 8 cycles per second, 4 to 8 hertz. So these lights might flicker on and off 6 times a second.
Right.
So what happens is your brain starts matching that rhythm.
Yep.
Audio-visual entrainment. Your brain starts entraining to that frequency. You've got a group of people. You don't know what their brain's doing, right? And so how do we pick approaches that are going to work?
Right.
For presumably everybody, or at least most of everybody. So what we do instead is we just go through each week different protocols that seem most likely to have an impact based on the data we've collected. So I already mentioned that slow brain waves and fast brain waves tend to be the things that show up the most frequently. Well, so we'll do theta. Let's try theta. And what'll happen is half the people in the class are like, whoa, that was interesting. Maybe something happens. Sometimes people will feel like a felt presence with theta.
Yeah.
Which is a little freaky.
A little freaky.
It's a little freaky. But then some of the people will be like, eh.
Yeah, I took a nap.
We're good. I don't know. It was fine. All right. And then next week we try gamma, right? The complete opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And half of the people will love it. Half the people, And then we do Gansfeld.
Yeah.
Right? And then we do a left-right hemisphere split. Because the way the glasses are set up, the way the lights are, there's 2 lights here, 2 lights here.
Okay.
On both sides.
Got it.
And so the way the visual field works is that the left visual field for both eyes goes to the right hemisphere. And the right visual field for both eyes goes to the left hemisphere. So we can split it on the glasses so that we're literally sending different frequencies to the left and right hemisphere.
Got it.
So we'll do that, right? So, and then we have one that I call roller coaster, which it's not sitting on anything. Yeah. It's just going like, woo, whoa, whoa, right? Yeah. So it's a little bit more just disruptive.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because usually by the end of we usually do 6 weeks. Usually by the end, I don't want to say everybody, most everybody has found at least one protocol that seems to help them.
Yeah.
Kind of feel more tapped in, feel more connected. they start talking about having more synchronicities in their life. Their dreams have become more interesting all of a sudden.
Right.
So sometimes it doesn't show up sort of like, again, now I can talk to angels.
For example.
Sometimes that happens.
Okay.
But sometimes it's more subtle, right? Like people are like, oh yeah, like synchronicities are bonkers, right? Yeah. It's just like constant, and it's like, okay. So again, which means something has shifted. You've changed the way you're paying attention.
Right.
And so it's a process, right? Like I feel like we're always developing in this world, right? If you're in this world and you're trying to explore,
right,
it's a learning process.
And not everybody is trying to explore.
No.
Which is totally fine.
Totally.
You don't have to.
No.
Some of us feel compelled to. I hope that's fine, because that's what I'm doing.
I think it's fine.
Yeah.
But and certain authors that I respect and things like this, they talk about this in this world, right? That it takes practice, that it's, if you're trying to develop these things,
yeah.
I think of it like a skill, like any other skill.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to get good at playing the guitar, well, you better practice.
You better do the work.
You're not just going to pick up a guitar and all of a sudden going to be able to play something amazing,
And that's a super interesting example of that. I've known musicians who just picked up a guitar or bass for the first time and just started shredding.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is. But then again, we also have these people who seem to be natural psychics or
right.
gifted in psi phenomena that just works for them. And it all seems like it's the same kind of talent that's just waiting.
Yeah. Yeah. Certain people are wired for certain things.
Right.
And if you happen to get lucky and...
Let's call it lucky. They might feel crazy.
Lucky in terms of finding the thing that you're wired for.
Got it.
Right? Because you could be wired to play the guitar and never get exposed to a guitar.
Brutal.
Wouldn't that be terrible?
Terrible.
It's like the worst thing I can imagine.
It's right? Really bad, yeah.
It's really bad. But if you're wired to be able to tap in, okay, it's going to be easy for you probably. It's, it's just natural. But if you're like me, not wired for the guitar,
yeah.
I can learn to play the guitar. I've learned to play a little bit, mm-hmm. right? It takes a lot of work,
yeah.
and it takes a lot of practice, and you do get better.
Yes.
Right? And like right now, I'm practicing the mind sight stuff, seeing
right.
through a blindfold.
So cool.
And when I first put the blindfold on, I couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
Like nothing.
Yeah.
The person that's teaching me, was kind of like, oh, let's just test where you're at,
Yeah. Like, I'm in the dark.
Can like hold up this like piece of like red paper and like stick it right in front of your face, like nothing.
Nothing.
Like zero, right?
Yeah.
And just the other day, just in the last week, like I'm doing whole decks of cards.
No kidding.
Hold up a deck card, boom. Ace of spades, six of clubs.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
So now that's taken me about 2 months
yeah.
of practice. And I'm not walking you through all of the...
No.
And there's still days where I'm like, oh, come on, like it just won't open, right? Or it's like super fuzzy.
Yeah.
And then some days where it's crystal clear. I'm holding it over here because like I've got this nice window here.
Yeah, I hear about those windows. It's so weird.
Little window over here.
Right.
And I'm like, I want it to open up, right?
Yeah.
Which again, what I've heard is that if you practice long enough, it will. Like the whole field will open. So again, back to the idea that I think there's a practice, you have to put the time in
yeah.
to whatever these things are if you want to see the results.
Right. Yeah. And to your point, it's all individualized, or it seems to be. So finding the right practice for yourself might be the most important thing. So just because something doesn't work after 1 or 2 tries, maybe it's not the right thing for you.
Right.
Which is okay, fair.
Okay,
and then
fair.
if you want it badly enough, you will go through the process to find what the right approach is for yourself. Yeah, and I noted, I was playing around on your website the other day. You do something similar with finding the right meditations to help start quieting your mind or finding where you want to be. How well has that, I'm assuming that's worked quite well for folks, but how does that help differentiate things just based on the approach to the meditation? That surprised me a little.
Yeah. And so, that's kind of another branch of the work that we do,
Yeah.
NeuroMeditation. And so really the whole thing was kind of born out of looking at the research on meditation and seeing that, other researchers had gone through and created these categories
Right.
of meditation based on how you're using your attention and your intention. So, we came up with our own terms, but, focus, mindfulness, open heart,
Right.
quiet mind.
Yeah.
And there's some overlap between them in terms of what you're doing, but each of them affects the brain differently.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because if you change the way you're paying attention and you change your intention,
Yeah.
you're going to use your brain differently.
And every time I go into one of these practices, it's always like, okay, set your intention. And all I think is, okay, fine, whatever. Maybe I should pay more attention.
Maybe you should pay more attention to your intention.
Yeah. Oops. Nice. Thanks. I feel seen.
But this is exactly, the point, right? It's kind of like, well, okay, if you're wanting to meditate for a specific reason,
Right.
okay, fine. What's your reason?
Right.
Well, I want to be less stressed.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, which style of meditation is likely to impact that part of your brain
Right.
that's related to stress?
Yeah. So like for me, sitting there and imagining a lotus opening on the top of my head probably wouldn't help. I would be stressed beyond belief trying to do that in a hyper-focused meditation. Right.
Right. So so hyper-focus isn't necessarily going to be, it can lead to stress relief.
Totally. Might not for me, but yeah.
Might not for you. But we also know that things like mindfulness practices, we already know this, are very good for stress.
Yeah.
Right? Because what you're learning to do is shift your perspective outside of yourself and observe. Right? So it's like third party.
Yeah.
So instead of being caught in your experience, default mode network,
Right.
instead of being caught in your experience and interpreting it in a narrative and all of the self stuff that's going on that creates more stress and anxiety, you're stepping out of it and observing yourself more objectively.
Yeah.
And just doing that all of a sudden quiets everything down. So really all we did with the system was take the data that already exists and organize it.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. Structure it in a way that helps people identify what will help them.
Yeah. And try to make it more user-friendly.
That makes sense. Anything else you'd like to touch on today?
I feel like we've
run the gambit.
I feel like we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that there's nothing jumping out that,
Yeah. Well, and hey, just for full disclosure, that was not a paid plug for his services and website. And also, I really think it's cool what he's doing. So, Jeff, thank you so much.
Yeah.
After
who
this,
do I make the check out to?
Yeah. Hey, not now. After this, I do want to chat children's books because I read some of that. I was like, oh, I like this. But that's all off of this. Everybody, thank you so much. I'm still so excited that I got Jeff for episode 1 of season 2. Thanks for waiting for this. I appreciate all you guys. Jeff, again, thank you so much for having me down here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this has been great.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
See you, gang. All right, gang, that's it for today's episode. A huge thank you to Dr. Jeff Tarrant for taking time out of his busy schedule to join us and share his work and wisdom. And of course, thanks to Team NMS, social media maven Anna, the Wild Orazan, and graphic design ninja Emily Rivers. The show wouldn't exist the way that it does without the two of you. Be sure to mark your calendars for our next episode, dropping in 2 weeks, with the legend herself, Dahlia Burgoyne. It's going to be a good one. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share the podcast with a friend. It really helps us grow and bring on even more incredible guests. You can follow along on Instagram at No More Strangers Podcast to keep the conversation going. Lastly, thank you again for tuning in, and until next time, take care, keep exploring, and as always, I hope that you now have one less stranger in your life.